What's up, Tacoma guys? Today we're installing the best belly pan for your third gen Tacoma. Let's get this bad boy on. The first step to installing the belly pan is to remove the factory skid system. We need to remove the front engine skid and the transmission skid first, and then we'll remove the two back cross braces. We'll remove the 6 bolts using a 12mm socket. These 2 center bolts on the front crossmember we need to save for the belly pan front bracket. Ooh. The next step is we're going to remove the end caps out of the front crash bar and the bottom braces for the factory skids. You'll do this using a 17mm socket. Let's get them off and keep going. The last few pieces we have to remove are the back 2 crossmember braces, right here and right here. We'll do so using a 12mm socket. On our skid system, we have 3 brackets that need to be put in before you put the main skids on. Those brackets go on the front crossmember, the middle crossmember, and the transmission crossmember. On the transmission crossmember, we need to remove 2 bolts, right here and here. Using a 14mm socket and wrench, we're going to take out those bolts and start putting all those gussets on. Save these bolts because we will need them later. Next, we're going to install the front skid brace onto this front cross member. Using your bolts that you saved and a 12mm socket, we'll get this on. Make sure you do not fully tighten this. You want to leave it loose until the install is complete. Again, I can't stress it enough, we need to leave these 2 bolts loose until we finish the complete install. In the kit, you get a 4-nut strip. This strip goes on the cross member between the oil pan and transmission pan. The strip slides right up on top like this, and we'll leave that right there as next step is to put on the front skid. Now we're going to throw on the front main skid. To do this, you want to grab 2 of the longer countersink bolts and 2 of the shorter countersink bolts. When we put this on, we want to leave all the bolts loose until the final install is complete. Then you can go back there and retighten everything. I cannot stress that enough. That makes this install a lot easier. If you tighten everything before the install is over, it's going to make it a lot harder getting everything to line up. When putting this front skid on, it is easiest to do the bottom two middle countersinks into the bracket we put on. In the hardware kit, you'll have your countersink bolts, you'll get 2 countersink washers, and out of the 4 flange nuts, you want to grab 2 to bolt onto the front part of the skid to the crash bar. The 2 longer countersinks go right here on this middle cross member between the oil pan and the transmission pan. They go up into that 4-bolt strip. Using a 7/32 Allen, we're going to lightly screw in these bolts. Again, we want to leave these loose until the final install is complete, and we can go back there and tighten everything. Now it's time for the transmission crossmember bracket. This bracket goes on over the transmission crossmember, and we're going to use the 2 1/2-inch bolts and nuts that came in your kit, and the factory bolts that we took out of the crossmember. We're going to use these again to put this bracket on. This spacer that came in your kit goes on the back side of the transmission crossmember between the bracket and the crossmember. When you have this up and in, you will want to slide this down and in between the crossmember and the bracket. I'll show you how to do that. First, we're going to use the factory bolts that we took out to hold up this bracket. We're going to leave these a little bit loose for right now until we get the 1/2-inch bolts in. I know I've been stressing this whole install, I'll leave everything loose until it's all on. There's just one piece we do have to fully tighten before we put on the transmission TK skid, and that is this crossmember bracket. This we do want to fully tighten before we put the skid on. On this bracket, you'll see these tabs. They will crush down when you tighten this. They are designed to crush down and hug the crossmember. So don't freak out if you see them sucking down. That's supposed to happen. Now we can put on the transmission TK skid. Using the 2 remaining long bolts and grab a few of the short countersinks, we're going to throw this skid up and lightly tighten it to the brackets. If you have a friend, have them come by and help you lift this into place. If not, you can use a transmission jack like I am. Again, leave these loose until we have everything bolted up. We have the last cross member for this kit. We're gonna put it in and bolt it to the skid, and then we need to drill 2 holes into the underside of the frame, here and here. We will fully bolt this in and drill up from the bottom into the frame and bolt it up. We also need to remove the inner frame caps on each side to access the drill holes. Now that we have all the countersinks into this rear cross member, we're going to go through and tighten this row of countersinks fully tight, and then we'll tighten the rest of the skid and then come back and drill in the cross member holes. A tech tip on doing this is to always start from the center bolt and work your way out when tightening the aluminum skid. Now that we've got this back cross member bolted in, we're going to go to the front, get it fully aligned and fully tighten it. Now that we've got these 4 bolts tightened on the front main skid to that front bracket, we're going to align this front piece. To do so, you want to check this back gap between the rear transmission TK skid and the front IFS skid. If you see the gap and it's consistent all the way through, you're good. If not, you can use a hammer to tap it a little bit to adjust the skid to get the gap perfectly correct in the back. I'll show you how to do that right now. If you look, you can see our gap is not even from side to side. It is thinner here and bigger here. To tighten up this gap, we will hit the front of the skid with a dead blow just to tap it back and close that gap. Once you get your gap correct, you can tighten these 4 bolts. Once you get those 4 bolts tight, you will install the gussets that gusset the transmission skid to the oil skid. These 2 gussets came with your kit, and there are 4 button heads that come with the hardware. We'll use these to install the gussets. They go on the sides, on the driver's side, and the passenger side. Now that we got that center section buttoned up, we can finish tightening the front skid. To do so, we're going to tighten those 2 bolts that we left loose on this front bracket using a 12mm socket. Then we will tighten up the last 2 bolts on this front skid here and here. To access the 2 bolts in the bracket, you go through the access holes in the skid plate. Now we can put on the oil filter access door to complete the front part of the install. Moving further back, we can now install the oil pan access door. The 4 countersink bolts that we left loose on the transmission bracket going through the skid, we can tighten now. The final step to installing this awesome belly pan is to drill the frame for the back cross member. To do so, we're going to remove these back 2 caps on each side of the frame, center punch these holes, drill them, and bolt it up. Using a 12mm socket, I'm going to remove the brake line bracket. Now that we have the frame caps removed, we're going to take our center punch and hammer and center punch the holes to drill the frame. Using a 3/8 drill bit and drill, we're going to drill that center punch. Remember guys, safety first, and always wear your safety glasses while drilling holes, and watch out for those hot metal shavings. Now the passenger side. Now that we've drilled the frame, we can finish installing the very rear cross member. Using the 3/8 bolts, washers, and flange nuts that are left in the kit, you can bolt up the cross member to the frame and complete this install. Using a 9/16 socket, we're going to tighten the bolt in. One of the last steps is to install the frame caps and rebolt the brake line. Now that you finished the install on the world's toughest 3rd gen Tacoma Bellypan, this bad boy can take any abuse you throw at it. Go out and use it. This completes the install for your 3rd gen Tacoma Bellypan. Make sure you like below, subscribe, and share this video.